Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is the Deathnote Live Action E7. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in this episode. So in this episode, a lot happened. It starts where the last one left off after the Cerritos test for Light. He's brought back to the task force headquarters. Elle briefly handcuffs them together, but once Light decides to join the investigation, Elle releases them right away, and then they do discover that Yotsuba is looking for talent for a commercial, and so they do decide to infiltrate Yotsuba using Misa, and Matsuda becomes the manager of Misa for the purpose of the interview, while Light is also in this series one of the people who infiltrates Yotsuba, and he goes in first as a makeup artist, and then he breaks off and changes into a janitor outfit, going to the conference room where he installs a camera in it before making his escape. They then, of course, watch the footage from the camera and discover that Yotsuba is definitely acting as Kira, but there's 8 people in the conference room. And it's also revealed that Yotsuba has contracted the 4th greatest detective in the world, Babel, who is also near, who is working with Elle in this case. And so Babel helps Yotsuba, but not really, because he is working with Elle ultimately. Either way, Babel does get Yotsuba to delay their plans to kill people, while at the same time they then use the month of time they've gotten to try to figure out how to arrest Yotsuba, and they come up with the option to have the fake news report from the original anime where Matsuda pretends to be behind a screen and is going to reveal Kira's identity, which of course does draw out Higuchi, who then first goes to the talent agency, pulls out the fake profile of Matsuda, and writes it in the notebook, but he doesn't die. This confuses Light and Elle because they don't know what he did. They just saw him write down the name. Then they move forward with Higuchi going to the TV station. He does unfortunately kill a regular traffic cop on the way because he got pulled over for speeding, and then continues forward to the TV station where he is arrested once he realizes it is a dummy behind the screen. When he's arrested, he drops the notebook. Elle picks it up first, sees Rem, and then goes over to Higuchi to ask him questions. Meanwhile, Light, who's left behind, picks up the notebook, regains all of his memories, and after cradling the notebook like a baby, he then opens the secret compartment in his watch to write down Higuchi's name, reclaiming ownership of the notebook just as he planned. And that's where we end the episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happened in the episode, it's now time to rank the episode. And as always, we'll be ranking on our mostly objective ranking list, which uses set values to determine the score, followed then by the personal ranking list. So our mostly objective ranking list, we start with our single episode supporting character introduction. And I felt very bad for this character who was just doing his regular job and then ends up dead for it. So I decided, even though it's a bit part, to give it 1 point, and that was Shiroba Korihito, who was the cop who ends up dying at a regular traffic stop because Higuchi decided to speed. Then we had our multi-episode supporting character introductions. And there's a lot of characters here, but as I did already introduce the Yotsuba group as a whole in the previous episode, this episode gives us all of their names. But I am going to count them all as 3 points together because the Yotsuba group as a whole was already introduced previously. So we have Oi Takashi, Higuchi, Kyosuke, who does end up being Kira, Shimura Suguru, Takahashi Eiichi, Hattori Ariyoshi, Namikawa Reiji, Kida Masahiko, and then Mido Shingo are all of the 8 Yotsuba group, and again, Higuchi is the one who actually ends up being Kira, which brings us to the multi-episode supporting character development, also worth 3 points, which is Higuchi is revealed as Kira, takes the ideal, and then is arrested before dying of a heart attack. Then we had the impactful, memorable, moment line, etc. Now, originally, had the handcuffing lasted longer than like a minute on screen, I would have put that here, but it was too disappointing, so I did not give it any points. However, when Light and L arrive at the arrest of Higuchi, it is a very epic entrance. Basically, they're backlit from behind, one in white, one in black, walking forward kind of with the halo around them so you can't see their faces. And then they, of course, have their little back and forth about Higuchi while Higuchi's kind of blinded by the light. You have to see it, but it was very epic of an entrance, and I thought that it was definitely worth 3 points. Then we have our multi-episode main character developments, and we have a few that happened. So, of course, we had Misa, Light, and Matsuda infiltrating Yotsuba and installing the cameras, auditioning for a role, acting as the manager, etc. We have Nier joining Yotsuba as Babel, who is the 4th ranked detective in the world after L's top 3, so technically 2nd, and also is revealed Nier is working with L at this point. And then we have L seeing Rem, so learning that Shinigami exist. And then Light, of course, regains his memories. So that is 4 points times 4 for this episode. Needless to say, it's accrued a large enough number of points that it doesn't matter how many negatives there are, it's still going to be yet another perfect episode objectively. But there were a couple of negatives. First is when Misa is at a photo shoot, Mikami confronts her about potentially being the second Kira. And she, at this point, doesn't have her memories, so she is like, nope, not the second Kira. And Mikami, instead of taking her no for an answer, decides to physically grab her and like shake her. And I know that's for dramatic effect, but at the same time, don't lay hands. That is all I'm saying there. So minus 2 points for that. And then I didn't really take points for this one, but I did again want to honorably mention the fact that Higuchi killed someone just for doing their job, which was very rude. However, he is not like Light where he lets the innocent go. So it's to be expected of him, which is why I'm not taking the points. But I did want to point out that I felt very negatively about killing someone just for doing their job. And I felt the same way in the anime, but I think I just glossed over it. Whereas in this one, I think it was a very bad idea of him, a very bad thing for him to do. But again, I'm not taking the points for it. But either way, this is a 10 out of 10. Now, with our live action rankings so far, they are just in episode order because when more than one episode has the same score, it ranks in episode order, and we haven't had a bad score yet because we've only had 10s. So the ranking is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the personal ranking, however, we do mix things up a bit. So, spoiler first, I did rank this episode a 10 out of 10. There was just way too much happening in the episode for it to be anything else. I didn't feel like there were some things that upset me, but then at the same time, I also understand why they were there for plot reasons. So I don't really have a problem. So, for example, disappointment. In the anime, the handcuffing lasts months, and it's one of the more amusing sort of segments because, you know, they'll get in a fight while they're handcuffed and then they end up like pulling and pushing, and it just ends up funny, and they end up having to go on joint dates with Misa because they're handcuffed together. And so it's a whole saga in the anime, of them being handcuffed together, and one of my favorite ones because of the moments that exist within it. And then in this series, they decided to have them handcuffed together for literally 1, maybe 2 minutes on screen. And on the one hand, that makes sense because they are speed running the plot a little bit, because they are only 11 episodes and a live action series. So I understand why they didn't go through with the handcuff saga, but it was disappointing that it was only for a couple minutes. Babel being near, that's new, that wasn't in the anime. In the anime, they contracted another detective, but it was one of L's top 3 detectives, which meant that L was playing both sides briefly, or rather, his Iber was doing the playing of one of L's aliases for them on L's orders. Then there was the fact that, like, Light was not subtle when he got his memories back. He, like, starts cradling the notebook like it's the most precious baby that's ever existed. He even, like, opens it, smells the pages, and it's like, okay, now I've got to reclaim this notebook without leaving evidence in the notebook. And then he does his watch trick that we know with the needle and writing Higuchi's name in his own blood before closing the watch again. And then Higuchi, of course, dies. He gets to keep his memories because he's now the owner of the notebook again. Oh, and then he has like this ridiculously creepy smile on his face. And I'm like, I understand you're conveying something to the audience here, but goodness, if anyone was standing in front of him, there was no question that he would be arrested immediately as the original Kira because he was just way too loving towards that book with that creepy smile. And then also, when he's infiltrating Yotsuba, he almost gets caught, and then he manages to sneak out of the room. And yet a guard comes. He's completely unsuspicious. He looks like a janitor. He's dressed like their janitor. He's carrying a ladder. He looks like he's supposed to be there. But then he immediately makes himself suspicious by running while he's in disguise, which then, of course, leads to the security guard chasing him. And then the only reason he manages to escape is that he happens to pass by another janitor, which acts as enough of a distraction for him to get to the car and leave. And I just thought, like, if you're blending in, you're in disguise, why are you running? That makes you suspicious. But they needed the chase scene and to build the tension, I assume. There's also a nice scene between Light or Elle and Nier where they're building a puzzle and then Elle puts down a wrong piece and Elle in his melancholy is basically saying like there's a part of him that wants that thinks Light is Kira, but there's a part of him that doesn't want him to be. And that Nier may need to be the one to put in the final piece of the puzzle, essentially foreshadowing his own ending. There's also a sweet moment where Light, while he's Light without his memories, keeps calling El Ryuga instead because that's the alias that he first introduced himself under. And when Matsuda asks him why he keeps calling him Ryuga instead of El, Light notes that it's because he'd rather him be his friend Ryuga than the detective L. But as soon as he gets his memories back and becomes Kira again, he starts referring to L as L once again, which I liked how that happened. And I think that they have a great friendship, and it's really, really unfortunate that it has to have a tragic end. But ultimately, I did feel, again, a lot happened in this episode. A lot of good things happened in this episode. They also had their epic entrance, which I noted on the mostly objective list. So I couldn't give this episode anything other than a 10. And in fact, I think it is so far the best one. And that is why our live action ranking so far for the personal list does have 7 in first place, followed by episode 4, episode 1, episode 5, episode 6, episode 3, and then episode 2 is currently in last place. Bringing us now to the series ranking so far. And of course, we have Anime Part 1 in first at 70.77%, Anime Part 2 in second at 31.82%, The live action, I don't know if it's gonna be able to be beaten by the anime, but it's got a perfect score so far of 70 out of a possible 110. On our personal ranking side, part 1 of the anime is also in first place at 60.38%. Part 2 is in second with 49.09%. And then the live action currently has a score of 62 out of a possible 110. But with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Death Note Live Action Episode 7. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.